good sanitation, that they believe that they need to take back and be with their ancestors and be like women were in the early 2,000 years ago when we died and like men dragged us by our hair, I don't know.
Yeah, mental problem in society when we are so there are a group of people that are so privileged to the point where they are too privileged to use indoor plumbing. When they say that they're too privileged to have a bathroom, like that is I think is a staple. If you don't have a bathroom or like a place to take a shower whenever you want to, like an out, it's just.
And these people aren't. I'm sorry, but I don't know their financial situation, but if you're hanging out with Ryan Cabrera, you're not poor. You're not. You're running around in Hollywood. So, it's just privilege and it's fake. It's that whole mystic new age bullcrap, Yeah. And so I honestly knew very little about this woman. And anyway, so in this first slide, she's basically talking about how she has her boyfriend's friend who is concerned enough about her and her unborn child, has expressed to her multiple times that he is concerned about her choice to have no prenatal care, and wants to know if she's going to have a crazy hippie birth. And so she says, I'm 29 weeks along and I have already explained my reasons, my beliefs, and the reasons behind each belief to him so many times already that the time I just said, yep, and was ready to change the subject. He pressed on about how we need to at least get to know the docs in our area just in case. So I told him that as a healthy woman, I trust that I know what's best for my body and my baby. And I know that this is the right choice for this family. And he said I was naive and believing I was healthy and that only a doctor can tell if you're healthy. And he told me that only a doctor could tell if I'm healthy. Wait, what? She has like 2 emojis going like this. Then went on to tell us how irresponsible and reckless we are since we haven't gone for any checkups. At this point, all we could do was just smile and nod. You can explain yourself a million times with logic and proof, but a person unwilling to have an open mind to relearn will never see things differently than what we have been brainwashed to believe. He left shortly after, and we brushed off his negativity and carried on our wonderful day by recharging naked in the sun. Gross.
Oh, recharging.
Right?
So she said that the doctor said that only a doctor can tell if you're healthy, correct?
Her boyfriend's friend was like, I guess, pushing back on her and saying like, how do you know that you're healthy? Right? You don't know that you're healthy. And that's very true. Yes. Pregnancy can have a lot of things can happen in your pregnancy. For instance, my liver enzymes were elevated. I developed placenta previa, which meant my placenta was on top of my cervix. If you don't have an ultrasound and you have no understanding of like what's going on in your womb, you literally have no idea if the baby has a good environment, if they're being fed correctly, if they're growing correctly, if there's infections, if you are a carrier of infections. Many pregnant women develop infections like strep B. We can have UTIs that can go into the uterus. I mean, there are so many things that can affect the baby because it's connected to you. So he was right. It is naive to believe that you're healthy.
Agree. And understand this desire to want to go back to the way that our ancestors gave birth. They didn't have a choice. The reason that they gave birth the way that they did was because there was no alternative. And It's not a better method. It was just the only method that they had at the time.
Right. Exactly. It's not like they willingly chose that. But the thing is that even when women were doing this back then, they at least had midwives. I mean, we've had midwives in the United States since the colony, since the 1500s. Mm-hmm. So it's not like we've been willy-nilly having babies out in the wild. We haven't. We've had help and we need help. Childbirth is extremely dangerous.
Surely she had people that were going to be there though with her to do this.
It was just her boyfriend. That's it. In this remote location.
These people should not be allowed to reproduce ever again. Like they should both be sterilized.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, so what really compelled me to share the story wasn't so much like the atrociousness of it and the fact that like these free birthers are lunatics. It was more that her story was very parallel to the birthing experience that I had. And when I was reading through all of the screenshots, and I'm not going to share all of them with you. I didn't even share them in my article because I didn't think it was really necessary to see, you know, every single thing that she said and what people were saying back to her. It, you know, the overall story is that the woman made a horrible choice, right? And she had this really, really hard labor. And she, from the start, you know, she went into labor and she was having really severe contractions. She was throwing up. She was having back pain. And she wasn't progressing, you know, day after day after day, she was logging into this Free Birth Society webpage, on Facebook, this group, and like describing how her labor was basically stalled. And, you know, she's talking about back pain. She's talking about vomiting. She's talking about contractions coming really, really fast. And that was very similar to how my own labor was. And my son was stuck on my pubic bone. And so there was a lot of similarities where like I tried to push for 4 hours. I threw up the whole time. My contractions were super powerful. I was in labor for like 3 days, you know, so her water breaks, I think like the second day of her labor. And when her water breaks, she notices that the discharge isn't clear. And so typically when your water breaks, like for instance, like amniotic fluid is clear. So a baby that's like in your tummy, they're just in this clear fluid. And when your water breaks, it's like, it looks literally like water. It shouldn't have, there might be like little tinges of blood. That's not abnormal, but she was describing that it was like brown. And that's a sign of meconium, which is fecal, like baby fecal matter. Basically like the babies during the birthing process, they defecate, right? I mean, they're just like you or I, they get rid of their waste. The danger is that when they're in the uterus and the water is there, everything is sort of like protected and they don't get exposed to bacteria and that kind of stuff. But once the water's gone, all of that bacteria can get onto the baby and the baby is exposed to all of those germs. The baby can also inhale their poop. They can aspirate on it. They can develop pneumonia. It's a really big deal if your child like swallows it. So she notices that her discharge is brown. And, you know, she's in this group and she's like, well, I don't know. I think my baby might have smelled like maybe it's swallowed some meconium. I'm not sure. And like the mothers are like, oh, that's fine. Like, it's okay if your discharge is a little bit brown. No big deal. My baby swallowed it. They're just, fine. It's not fine. Like babies can die from it, but whatever. So, you know, that happens, right? Well, as the days go on, that discharge gets more and more brown and it starts to stink, right? And she's not progressing. I mean, she is laboring for like 4 days and nothing's happening.
4 days.
Yes. Right?
God.
So in the hospital, typically if you have had your water broken, and this is why this resonated for me is because my birth was very long, is my water broke on a Tuesday, but I didn't deliver until a Thursday evening. I had to be given antibiotics because my water had been broken for so long. And the longer your baby is exposed to like the amniotic fluid has like, when your cervix is open, any bacteria can get in there, right? And so they can develop infections. Your uterus can also develop infections when it's open like that. So it's a really risky time. And so in a hospital, typically they would give you an antibiotic by an IV while you're in labor to prevent you and the child from developing an infection, right? So when I was in the hospital, I got an antibiotic, which prevented me and my son from getting sick. Thankfully, she, on the other hand, didn't have that, right? And so she has this like goop coming out of her and she doesn't do anything. And the group does nothing to say, like, They don't tell her to go to the hospital. They don't tell her to seek help. They're telling her how to reposition her child. They're telling her how to do different progressions. They're telling her to get into a bath. They're basically like, you can do it. Yay, rah, rah, rah. When clearly this pregnancy has not progressed, or the labor has not progressed. She has potential meconium in her, uterus that the baby has been exposed to. There's some sort of infection going on. The baby is not coming out. So she's, this is a high risk pregnancy at this point, but she's not doing anything about it. So finally, like, everything goes silent and she doesn't respond, and people are trying to check in and they're like bumping the thread. And then all of a sudden, like, is this the thread that has you can probably go to the one where she's talking about things not going to plan, Dave.
Oh, I think that's number 3, Dave.
Oh, yeah, we can skip number 2. The other slide was just that she's an anti-vaxxer, of course, right? Like, of course she's an anti-vaxxer. So after all of that's said and done, right? So she like goes through this whole process, and she's here. I'll read it to you. So sometimes nothing seems to go according to plan. That's been the theme of this pregnancy. Lots of moving, shifting business, living in a hotel randomly, and so much in between. But through all this crazy, spontaneous plan shifts, my partner Chris and I have been strongly united together through it all. Our plan together since day one was an unassisted home birth. We researched everything out there and felt so prepared. It wasn't the easiest pregnancy, as I felt like I had every blah symptom pregnant ladies experienced. But I knew it'd be worth it because it was just a matter of time before we'd have our baby. On October 1st, labor began, and it was all-nighter of surges. Then the sun rose and it stopped. It continued like that until the 4th. So 3 days. 3 days. Then the surges got terrible, and on top of one another from 7:30 p.m. on the 3rd to 7:30 p.m. on the 4th, when I think I basically passed out from exhaustion. The owner of the Free Birth Society, Emily Saldea, was kind enough to stay in contact with her through the worst of it when I thought I was going to die. So the founder of Free Birth Society was helping her through this, right? Which is just gross. And then I really appreciate her kindness and support through this process. As the surges keep coming every day, but still no baby, just making me more and more tired, and my body aches everywhere. Nothing I could do would ease the pain, but I tried so hard to stay positive. My water broke on the evening of the 4th and was discolored. Since I was 42 weeks pregnant, which is another red flag, anytime your baby is that overdue, they have a higher risk of dying. They have a higher risk of infection. There's a reason why OBs don't let you go past a certain period of time. But she didn't go to the doctor, so whatever. So since I was 42 weeks, I thought it was normal that her discharge would be brown. Babies can, like, the uterus can start calcifying if the baby's in there too long. But as the days went by, it got more foul smelling and turned a sick poop color, which was constantly leaking. And then the baby stopped moving on the 6th. I woke up on the 7th in so much pain, pouring meconium, that Chris and I agreed it was time to transfer. Only after the baby stopped moving and she was pouring fecal matter out of her vagina did she decide to go to the hospital. Her labor started on the 1st. She goes to the hospital on the 7th. At 9:30 a.m., we are admitted, and as soon as they saw the color and the smell of the fluids coming out, the first thing they did was listen by a Doppler for the heartbeat. Nothing. After bringing in three different levels of technology to find the baby, they informed us that their baby was gone. They found that her head was only an inch from exiting. So they found out that she was an inch from exiting, and they had set me up to start pushing. So basically she has to deliver the dead baby, right? And so they had to get a vacuum out. Her baby had